Hello, hello, blissful parents. Michelle Abraham, your host here today. Guys, I've got a great interview for you today. So let me tell you, let's say hi to our guests. I've got Figs O'Sullivan with me here today. Hi, Figs. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me on the show, Michelle.
Good. You're welcome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Blissful parents, let me tell you a little bit more about Figs. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's a well-known relationship expert and commander-in-chief to the top therapists in San Francisco. As the founder of Empathy, Figs' proprietary process provides relationship support and guidance to tens of thousands of couples and individuals who care about the quality of their relationships. Today, we're going to dive into all about all sorts of things. But I think, one of the most interesting things is that how our family relationships growing up really can affect and make an impact on how we parent or how we're triggered by our kids. So let's dive up there, Figs, and oh my gosh, help us out.
Yeah,
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 us
of
parents
course.
need to go to therapy, I think, first before we can become parents. That should be mandatory, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, parenting, I always say is the most humbling self-development
Mm,
course, right? Like
mhm.
you're
Agreed.
always going to meet the parts of yourself that need some work, right? Where you're not going to be yourself at best, right? Your
Right.
kids are going to trigger you, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, in terms of, how your own childhood impacts your ability to parent,
Mhm.
my work is primarily based on one theory. One theory is the foundation of it, and that's attachment theory. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've talked about attachment theory on your show
We actually
before.
haven't. No.
No, no. So attachment theory is the best theory we have of like to understand human development. And
Mhm.
in short, like we all need to be emotionally bonded from the cradle
Mhm.
to the grave. And so most people understand the cradle part as
Mhm.
parents, right? That when a baby is born, you yourself as a parent, your children, their first needs are not food and shelter. Their
Mhm.
first need is to have a good enough other on the other side of their birth that is going to be there for them so that
Mhm.
they don't die, like literally, right?
Right.
So so our organism, right, of our physiology is
Mhm.
built to detect, is our primary person there for us?
Right.
And there's different flavors of being there for us. So different people are sensitive to different flavors of there for us,
Mhm.
right? So one person is like, are you physically there for me? Another, do you see me? Another person is like, why am I never good enough for you? Let's just call them
Right.
all flavors of being
Right.
there.
Mhm.
But so the most important mechanism in relationship is this like attachment,
Mhm.
like sensitivity, that is my person there for me? And if it looks like they're not there for me, your organism actually experiences an existential threat. So a baby,
Mhm.
let's say there's no mom or good enough other, whoever the caregiver is on the other side of their birth, if it's not the birth mother, the baby is absolutely right to cry out, right? They're
Mhm.
facing an existential threat, right? I'm
Mhm.
sure you've heard this, right? A baby will die from lack of touch quicker than lack of food, right?
Wow.
So so basically, that doesn't change throughout your lifespan.
Mhm.
Like you've grown up and you might think now, because I'm a grown up, I can drive a car, I can fiddle around with my iPhone, right? That you're like, that you're really competent. But when
Right.
it comes to love, we're all still little babies inside.
Mhm.
So whatever your personal sensitivities, your
Mhm.
attachment, emotional bonding sensitivities, you're going to actually play those out with your spouse, co-parent. You're going to play all of that stuff out with them. So if you're sensitive, like to why am I not a priority to you, you're going to be triggered in that. Of course, you're going to
Mhm.
believe it really is just your spouse that is making you feel that. It's nothing to do with
Right.
your own childhood sensitivities. And of course, most likely, if that's the case, you're going to tell your spouse or co-parent, hey, how come you didn't come home at 5 p.m. like you said you would? And they'll probably be sensitive to a different flavor
Right.
of attachment,
Hmm.
right? Like, how come you're always disappointed in me when I do the very best I can to get across Vancouver traffic to see you,
Right.
right? But um, and so these dynamics are unavoidable inside of a relationship between two people that love each other.
Hmm.
And then, of course, they're definitely going to come up in between two people that are parents because you really need each other,
Right.
right? When you're parenting, school age kids together.
Yeah, and most likely you have very different parenting styles. Most
Well,
likely.
yeah. Yeah, well, look, this is another way I think about it is like, when you're born into a family, you're born into a culture, and part of that culture are values. And that's like, say, a goldfish bowl. And that
Hmm.
goldfish bowl is the way it is. The water, if you've got crystal clear water, but jagged rocks on the bottom, like that's just the goldfish bowl, And let's say
Right.
jagged rocks are we keep a clean house.
Right.
That's an important value. Well, that's just the way you think the world is. And that's a flavor of loveness, the house
Mhm.
being clean. Now, you meet your spouse at a rave and you like them because they were an amazing dancer and
Mhm.
they had a great glow stick. I mean, this is back in the day, clearly, right? Um, and they
Or
didn't
maybe
grow
Burning
up in the
Man, that's
same.
still relevant. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's true. So look, they didn't grow up in the same goldfish, family culture as your partner, right? Spouse. They grew up in a different family culture, different fish bowl, right? Where they didn't have jagged rocks. Let's say love means a house is clean. They had love means that as you leave the house for school, you get a little hug and a squeeze of both your cheeks and your parent looks you in the eye, right? And so that's a value now that I bring with me. And I believe because all I knew growing up was that fishbowl, I then bring those values. I didn't even realize I had them as this is the way love is.
Mm.
Love is providing a clean house. And then, of course, my spouse doesn't care about leaving their socks on the ground. And I'm like, how could you? Right? Because
Yeah.
it is universally true that people that love and care about each other, they do not leave socks on the floor. Right? And they don't think like the person doesn't even realize that's what they're saying. Like they don't even realize, look, I have now assigned deep emotional bonding meaning to the house being clean. I
Right.
actually think, oh, it's just a value. Well, no, like it's only a value because you've assigned this deep emotional bonding meaning to it. And the same with like, look, with someone leaving the house, if your parent doesn't look in the eye and squeeze your cheeks, right, acknowledge you, they like, oh, how could you? So yeah, I encourage parents to be like cultural anthropologists, right? That you are aware and can study your own family culture and understand what those values were and see that they're not universally true. When I grew up, you had to eat everything on your plate, right? Now, listen, that's a decent value, but it's not a universally true, that is a good thing, right? And then let's say someone else like grows up in a family culture, right? And I'd be an anthropologist where I can see when I grew up, it was really important to let kids be self-directed and only eat what they needed. It's a really good value, right? But they're not necessarily one isn't necessarily right or wrong. They just come
Mhm.
from different cultures. And then you're going to get together and you're creating your own culture. And so hopefully you can be very respectful and curious about like not see your own point of view as a universal truth.
Right.
And you can be curious about your own and the other person's values and where they came from.
Right. And then should couples then create the values that they both believe in strongly and then incorporate that together in their own fishbowl then?
Well, so this is was interesting. When you say should they incorporate together values that are really important to them, I would just think it's most important that they actually are willing to be curious about where this value comes from and like
Mhm.
see it and be able to see what is the primary emotional bonding significance of this value, because the value in
Right.
and of itself is not that important.
Mm-hmm.
um I know it sounds really weird and people are gonna
Mm-hmm.
like, they may not like it. Let's say you have a value of like a disciplined child is a good
Right.
child, right? And then let's say the opposite of that is kind child is a good child.
Right.
Right, you want to be able to, like, let's just say that's a disciplined child is a good child. That's an outcome of a process. That's the output, that statement, that value. So
Mm-hmm.
now we got to reverse engineer from the value. Where did that come from inside of me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where does that come from? Right? Well, that came from the family culture, the society, my own internal experiences, and whether that's I got too much discipline and I've internalized it, or I didn't get enough, and now I'm rebelling against not enough, and I will be providing discipline for my children, right? Like it's just really important to know where does this value come from? And realize, for flip's sake, sure, this is a secondary creation as a result of my vulnerable experiences as a human being,
Right.
right? And the same with the other person. Like, a kind child is a good child, right? Like, wait a second, instead of assuming this is a value, look at and of course I would tend to that one myself, but instead of going like, this is just true, wait a second, where does that come from inside of me? And then ideally, we've got two parents that could actually share what they discovered,
Mm-hmm.
not just argue their point.
Right.
Discipline creates strong, successful little capitalists, and the world is scary, right? Like, now you're really just trying to convince the other person of your value, or like, kind children, we need more of them in the world, a world that is facing like whatever you're, instead of trying to change the other person's point of view, like, could you actually share what you discovered about yourself, where this really comes from inside of you? Now, from that place, like, then, like, hopefully you're open and flexible, right? Like, to what actually makes sense, Like, let me give you an example from my own relationship. Like, I did grow up in I'm from Ireland, like going to the farm as a kid. And I was basically told, like, look, when you're a real man, you'll be able to eat that entire saucepan of potatoes.
Mm.
And if you left food on your plate, it was a crime against the starving children in Africa.
Right.
Right. So I did grow up with this value that, like, you have to eat everything on your plate. You do. Like, it's really bad, morally bad. It's unthinkable.
Makes it sound so ridiculous.
Well, I know, but this is the thing. So I know where it comes from inside me.
Right.
It's kind of ridiculous, right? It is ridiculous. I saw a comedian recently going, "How was I helping children in Africa by eating all this food?" Right? And my wife, I actually think it's really good, but I'm not able to override that deeply held cultural value all the time. The kids should be self-directed, have their own relationship. If they don't want to eat anymore, they don't eat anymore. But we put that food in the fridge, and when they're ready to eat, that's what they're going to have to. They then get to eat the food they didn't eat, right? But they develop their own relationship with food, and it's unbelievable. My kids are like fine with one cookie. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
They actually self-regulate themselves. So I actually see her value. It pains me. It works, right? It's really good, right? My kids' relationship to food is unbelievably good. And yet there's still going to be times where we're sitting at the breakfast table and I've made eggs and toast and the kids haven't touched it. And I'm like, the children all over the world with no breakfast, and look at you heading off to school with the food left on your plates, right? I'm not able to override it, but at least afterwards, and my wife and I might get in an argument about it, but at least afterwards I'm able to be curious about myself and see where it comes from, and then be willing to take on, like, I think you're right. I do like it, even if I have my moments of not being able to be consistent.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. It's so funny the way the way you lay it out like that really makes it sound funny. Sounds like,
Right.
yeah, it sounds more fun than those actual conversations that sometimes happen.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, growing up in Ireland, I don't think like it's, and I'm like 51, right? So in the 70s, I don't even realize how ever present the starving children of Africa were.
Yeah,
Like it really, so much of what what was right
yeah,
to do or not to do, you had to think about the starving children in Africa, right? It's crazy now
yeah.
when you look back, right?
Yeah, it's funny.
But
Wonder what our kids will look back on, like what we're doing now. To them. Like, do you
I
believe they ever
know,
told us that? Like,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So now empathy is such an innate thing that we want to
Mm.
really create those connections with our children and our significant other. Any suggestions for how parents can help
Yeah.
use empathy to connect?
Yeah. Well, so let's just, I think like with our kids, right? Well, look, with each other, again, like the key components to empathy is that I'll just list them off, but it's like one whole experience. One is you can accept the other person's experience as true. You
Hmm.
can validate them.
Hmm.
And accepting the other person's experience as true is people just don't even realize they don't do it. Someone tells me they're thirsty and I go, "Are you sure?" Or they say, someone tells me I'm hungry and I say, "Are you sure you've had enough water?" They tell me they're hungry and I'm already like discounting their experience. Are you sure it's not
Right.
something else? I have a headache. Well, have you had a pill? Did you
Right.
take any ibuprofen? It's like, Jesus Christ, would you take a moment to accept the person has a headache and acknowledge them? And headaches suck. Validate them.
Mm, yeah.
So the person has to feel like you actually heard them, you were with them before you try and change their experience.
Right.
And so,
We skip
and
that step sometimes, don't we?
was that?
So we skip that step sometimes,
We
don't we?
skip that. And by the way, and we especially skip, we might skip it with our spouses, partners, and we especially skip it with our kids.
Right. Hmm.
Right, they're crying, they're upset about something. Someone took their teddy bear and they're mad as hell. And we're like, ah, for flip's sake, I'll get you another teddy bear, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
Like whatever way we haven't accepted their experience and we can't validate them. We have to change them. We have to get them to feel better. So the first thing is like, look, it does make sense. Like I see you absolutely are mad as hell. And it absolutely makes sense. If some other little snot-nosed kid robbed my teddy bear,
Hmm.
I'm adding color just for I would
Love
not
it.
call anyone else's kid a snot-nosed kid.
Haven't laughed this much in an interview in a long time.
Okay,
That was
good.
good.
Mine are snot-nosed kids. But like, look, I would be mad as hell too, right?
Mm,
Like, so that's the first thing, just being able to accept and validate, and then ideally you can have feelings towards the other person. It's
mm,
actually really sad. Like they actually can see that I really get how you'd be hurting, and I feel for you. Like
mhm,
I'm feeling that upset with you. So
mhm,
that just calms someone, right? Like that the connection is there. You're
mhm.
feeling with me right now what I'm feeling, right?
Yeah.
Now, probably most important though is let's say something goes wrong between you, a parent, and a child. Probably the greatest place that you can use empathy is really getting like, let's say my son asked to see he's only allowed to use an iPad on the weekends. And he asked me for the 20th time on Friday morning, right?
Mhm.
Like for an iPad. And I'm like, listen, you little ferret, there's no iPad for you. Now, again, I don't call him a ferret, right? But I'm enjoying it now, right? Listen, you little
Absolutely.
ferret, there's no iPad for you. And he's really mad. And he's like, don't you talk to me like that. And I said, listen, I've had it up to here with you. Right.
Mhm,
And so he's really upset. Right. Later, I go back because I realized, look, I shouldn't have talked to him that way. Like I shouldn't. And I'm going to tell him, hey, look, I shouldn't. I'm not going to like you got to stop asking for your iPad. I shouldn't have talked to you that way.
mhm,
Right. It was mean. I hurt your feelings. I really get it. What's it like to hear dad say that he was absolutely wrong to talk to you that way? Right? Was it feel
mhm,
like inside to hear me acknowledge I was wrong?
mhm,
I shouldn't have talked to you that way. Right? And so, and that like I'm helping him get in touch with what it feels like inside,
mhm,
right? Himself. and then being with him in that experience. Like he gets to feel himself, be like, wow, here's a grown up accepting that I was upset, like accepting that they shouldn't have talked that way, even if I am annoying. And, you know, and he's allowing me to have my feelings, and he's willing to feel those feelings with me and be there in it with me. I'm blown away all the time how my kids let out almost every time in that moment of repair.
Right. Yeah.
Right, a big exhale, and those experiences are huge, right? And I'm often trying to invite them. Can you see me? See you? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to like see if I can maximize and stretch out that moment that they feel themselves hurting and they feel me being there with them, right? So that they can trust that, because here's the hardest thing in relationship is I got hurt before, and how could I trust that if I lay my heart open to you now, that I won't get hurt again?
Right.
And to grow like strong children, you want them to know that I could actually risk connecting and it not working out. So those moments of repair build their trust and ability to not take their marbles and go home, like after they got the feeling.
Yeah, and be open to that connection again. Yeah, that's so important. Yeah. Amazing. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do? And you have a quiz for parents to go check out at empathy.com, spelled with an I, so EMPATHI.com.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's empathy with an I in the end, not a Y in the end.com, because I couldn't afford empathy with a Y in the end.
Hey, that's pretty good second choice though.
I know, I had to just like, Jimmy rig. Or I think, what do you call it here in America? Not Jimmy rig, Jerry rig. But okay. But so basically we provide couples therapy, marriage therapy, couples therapy, whatever your preference, like, to call it, for, anybody that love each other and are really annoying each other. And then we help them get back to loving each other again. And we work with a lot of parents, because I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old myself. And we did develop this web app for couples where you can one of you takes the quiz. It'll tell you who you are in love and relationship from an attachment perspective. You can then invite your significant other. They then take the quiz. And then most importantly, they'll get their self-discovery report. And then most importantly, we combine your results so you see who you are as one entity together.
Cool. Yeah.
And like how you get into negative systems and what you have to do to get out of it. And that whole thing is free.
Cool.
And then we send these, like, I don't even know, is it daily or weekly little personalized emails given your answers that just kind of give you a little gentle invite to stay inside of the frame of remembering when you think your spouse is unbelievably annoying, it's probably because you're not feeling loved and hurting, and it's because they're really important to you. That kind of like reframes that it'll probably stop you. You were just about to slash their tires and you realize, the reason I'm feeling that way is because I love them. Like we've had a lot of tire companies reach out saying we've hurt their business. Because we stopped spouses taking such drastic actions.
I heard a friend call it love darts. I'm sending love darts. That's awesome.
Lots of we should sell love darts. That's a good idea.
That's great.
That would probably sell more than the couples therapy.
Right. Awesome. Well, Figs, thank you so much for being here with us today. I don't think I've laughed this much in an interview in a long time. So thank you for making it fun too.
Great. I don't know if it's good for me or sad, because I wasn't trying to be funny, but like, wow. I'm going to have to process this. Okay. No, thank you, Michelle. Really lovely to meet you. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
You were so welcome. And we hope to have you back again someday. Blissful Parents, Make sure you head over to empathy.com. Check it out. Take the quiz. That's empathy with an I, EMPATHI. So thank you so much, Figs. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye.